All righty. Good day. This is Paul of the House of Graber here at the Memoirs of a Farmer Boy podcast platform, I should say. Memoirs of a Farmer Boy is the platform where we talk about real life experiences of today concerning Revelation 18:4. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues." My goal is to share things that possibly can bring you out of your journey out of corporate into private, a little bit more into focus, and to help you along the way. So, first of all, I want to say that everything we do here at Memoirs of a Farmer Boy is protected and safeguarded under the laws of nature and nature's God, otherwise known as the courts of heaven. And our material is also protected and safeguarded under the private registered copyright of the House of Graber. And this is true wherever this material goes, whether it's audio, printed, intellectual property, video, implied, or otherwise. And as a caveat for today, especially because of a very special guest I have on with me, I want to say that we are definitely, most definitely outside of the Barfly Association. There's nothing going on here as far as legal advice. This is where we talk about real things rather than fiction. We do talk about fiction, but we don't give advice. So I have with me Soozie, who is a former paralegal. I have known her to some extent for what, almost a year now? Pretty close, or
Yeah.
And so this is going to be a very interesting dialogue because I've had many with her, even though it hasn't been on a podcast platform. But Soozie comes from the environment of legalism, I guess would be the proper way to say that. And I come from the opposite spectrum of living on the private side. So her experience in that arena, it is obviously quite different than my experience in doing not only researching in the private side, but execution of private trust and ministry and all manner of things, wills and just whatever it takes. So welcome, Soozie. I'm glad to have you on here, and this is going to be kind of I want to say a conversation. We're going to talk about things that people struggle with when it comes to living in the private. Because keep in mind, most people, I would feel safe to say, 99.99% of all people on planet Earth have been conditioned to believe that the corporate construct is real. And we're here to tell you it's fiction. So with that, go ahead, Soozie.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the invite and being here with you. I've been following you for a little while now, and it's really, really refreshing to even from the beginning of when we first started having our discussions and deep dives on various topics that I I found it so refreshing to talk with you about things about the private versus the statutory because I had so much to unlearn. And I have unlearned a lot of things, and it's helped me so much. So I really appreciate you um, having those conversations with me and then also inviting me here today so that we can discuss it further and possibly ring somebody's bell that might be going through what I was going through, which is a lot of confusion. And I believe that that construct is there to confuse us, all of us, each of us, and individually and collectively. And it's quite interesting that what you are led to believe to be the real laws. You're led to believe these statutes, these codes, these regulations, these are the rules. These are the ones that can make you or break you. It's just not true, because it's all established on sand. Fiction. Can't build your house on sand. Scripture tells us that, right? So it's been really helpful to unlearn that with you and to see where the true foundation of law is, where that starts, where that leads to, and how close we are to that supreme law, right? So some of the things that you've helped me to realize is that we are actually able to take the real law and create and construct our laws to live by in our own personal private lives. I never knew that. I thought we had to follow the rules. We had to use what was on the books. We had to look up the statute and see if we could fit it in, see if we fit into it and it could fit into our lives. And so I've learned from you that that's just not even necessary. We have the absolute ability, power, and we're built, created to create our own. And so that's been really, really wonderful. And I thank you for that. That's a big thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for also for the interaction and what you brought to the table from the legal side. And I'm gonna put a plug in here for this particular podcast. It really is for all the podcasts that I do, but I'm gonna make this note right here because it's really, really important pertaining to everything that we talk to or that we talk about, sorry. And this is what I'm talking about. In the patriot world, we hear this statement about I got to be careful because I might come unglued, but we hear this statement about the birth certificate is not ours. The money is not ours. The trust and all the stuff, the securities they set up are not ours.
Right.
Okay, I'm calling that a lie, a blatant lie. And I'll explain why I'm calling it a lie.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I've observed is every birth certificate I've ever looked at, and I can guarantee you all the ones I haven't looked at, this is true for every birth certificate, certificate of live birth, etc. There is always one thing that happens prior to that birth certificate being issued, and that is that a flesh and blood baby is born. If it wasn't, there would be no record, no certificate. And now we could argue about what share of it is ours, but the fact is that certificate, the wealth being hypothecated and being put in place, and the real wealth was there before we were born. It's an estate being passed on down. And that's why that can be created. The fictional wealth is based off of the real, like it's called color of law. That's the statutes. The color is a property of light, just like their statutes is a property of the real law. It's a color of law. But it always, always, always comes back to there was a flesh and blood living soul has entered this realm of where we live in before that security was created. So to say that it isn't ours is a blatant lie.
Yes.
I'm just calling it for what it is.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. And everything that transpires after that, we've got some truth mixed in with a whole lot of lies. The truth is there because, well, there has to be a certain level of disclosure, doesn't there,
Yes,
for even the lie to stand. So when you talk about the color of law, that's what it is. It's a coloring book. It's the difference between walking outside, feeling the sun on your face, the wind in your hair, being able to touch and smell grass, leaves, flowers, and the opposite of that is a coloring book that has a lot of pretty pictures of all of those things that you can't touch, you can't smell. It's just not real. It's a coloring book. And so I love using that as an analogy because that's the easiest way to share that and all of this difference between the statutory and the lawful, the legal and the lawful. And legalese, that word's thrown around a lot. And it really is. It's a different language. And it's designed that way so that, you got to be part of the club, right? You've got to know if you're standing in a courtroom and you don't speak legalese, why you need somebody there to speak for you, don't you? Because they're using words that you think you know. I've heard that before, but they're using it in a different way. It's got a different meaning. I can see that. I can
correct.
hear that. Yeah. So it really is a sleight of hand. Um, but they have to mix a little of the truth. That's why they use the same words. They just apply a different meaning to it. Different outcome is produced by using the same word. So I think that the point that you make about the one event that occurs before anything else is created is us. We're created. And so anything created out of that, from that us, is ours.
Correct. And
Right.
I might add, even a dead body of flesh and blood is still superior to the paper.
Yes.
And also, you make me, I just thought of something. The coloring book that you talk about is actually copyrighted by the Pope.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Kind of looks like the real thing.
Yeah,
Not.
but it's not. Yeah.
So I think you were going to have some questions for me if I quit rambling and,
Well,
throwing things, but go ahead.
so I get, as you can imagine, as soon as people find out that you have any type of legal comprehension of, and I'm talking the legal stuff, the legalese stuff, because let's face it, a lot of these, statutes, codes, regulations, and rules, they're not for us. They're meant for anything that is fiction. Um, they're meant for the employees. So that means them as well.
Yeah.
Uh, because these allegiances and these oaths that they take and that they swear and all of that removes them from the realm that you and I live in. They choose that, and many times people don't like to hear this, but we also have chosen that, and it's voluntary, right?
Yes.
And so we find these things out, and you go through that whole gamut of emotion. You're hurt, you're dismayed, you're angry, you're lost, confused. You go through all of those things. Then finally, when you can get yourself through all of that, then you're like, okay, I need to start asking questions. I need to start figuring out what's happening, what's happened, what's happening from here forward, moving forward. So a lot of the questions that come at me are, well, what about this? law? Well, there is a law that speaks to that, but it's not the statute that you're referring to. It isn't the code that you're referring to if you're talking about applying anything like that to yourself. Because the true law comes from our Creator, right? Nature's God, right? The God that of all creation. And it really comes down to that golden rule, right? Treat others as you would have them treat you. Don't have anything nice to say, don't speak. Things like that. Don't cause no one harm. Come in peace, go in peace, remain in peace, live in peace, things like that. And you helped me to open my eyes to that a lot, to like really take note and have that aha moment of, I've heard that my whole life. I've heard, and yes, he's absolutely bringing me right back to the basics of life, right? So those are the true laws. And when people ask these questions, they're asking because let's face it, we have to use some of these codes and these procedures and statutes in order to get their attention, to make them move in directions that we need them to move in, to recognize us as God's children, the creation that has the power, control, and ownership of all of the fiction they've tried to create. That's ours. We're taking it back and we're making it right. So a lot of these things, they go, for instance, 508C1A versus a 501C3 for a nonprofit. What's the difference? Well, the biggest difference that I have found, and we've discussed this, is that a 501c3 can put you in to, and this is basically for tax purposes, people ask these questions, right? So 501c3 is a tax bracket that you can fill out these forms and get yourself into. So why don't you talk to that for a moment and break that down a little bit more for folks that want to know the big picture difference and the detailed differences, speaking to the public versus the private.
Okay. So Christ said when they asked him about taxation, he asked him to see a coin, and then he said, whose image is on the coin? Well, it's Caesar's. And he said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. Well, first of all, if you melt the coin, you put it through the fire, what you will have left is what is real, the silver. The fakery will be gone because the fakery can't stand the heat because it's fake. Okay, but what he was also telling us, you can play over here in Caesar's kingdom, and then you'll pay tax to him. Or you can play over here in what is real, God's kingdom. You can be a member where we put you originally. That's where we're supposed to be. And then you honor and you tribute to your creator. He didn't, contrary to what the religious nut jobs tell us, he never told us we have. Fact is, the main accusation against him in front of Pilate was, they said, this man is going around telling people you don't have to pay taxes to Caesar. They knew what he was saying.
Yeah.
And it disturbed them greatly because he made it clear that there's no obligation. It's a choice. We live in a world of choices.
Yep.
So this thing about the 501c3 versus the 508, see, the background where Carol and I came from, the old order Amish, they jumped into that, the corporate Babylonian system. They sold their birthright like Esau did. They became a member. They became a corporation under the Vatican as a 501c3 corporation. Now, they're exempt from paying taxes as far as the church goes. The individuals still pay taxes.
Right.
Now, if they'd have stayed put, they already were an exception, because you have to sign up to be part of the club to get an exemption. If you're not part of the club, you're an exception to, like, we're not part of your outfit. You can't even, your rules are nothing to us. It doesn't matter which rules you talk about, they're nothing because we're an exception. See, when Joseph was put over in Egypt, he was put through a series of events. He was put into the second highest command in Satan's kingdom. That's what Egypt represents, is the slavery, the Satan system. So he sat in this high office as far as Satan's kingdom goes, and he used Satan's pen and his ring as a seal, and he signed a covenant with the other side, which in this case is the house of Israel. See, Joseph is one of the house of Israel, but he was sitting in the office of second highest command in Egypt. And he comes in with the position of that office, and he signs a covenant. So now there's a covenant that says Israel shall live. They're an exemption. They're an exception to the rule. They lived in Egypt, in the land of Goshen, but they never played by those rules until they contracted later on through their foolishness, same as we have here. But that covenant is still good because the covenant is forever. See, even Satan has to honor covenants. But if we violate the covenant, he's completely okay with it.
Right.
And, we could argue about, is Satan real, or is it a fiction of the mind? Or, well, there's some evil critters on this earth. I'm just saying. So, but we have that covenant, and we can choose, because that's how the Creator designed it from the get-go. We can choose to be in his realm, in his venue, and therefore we're a completely exception. It's called, now this is how the IRS and the Federal Reserve, this is the goggles they look through to see that. It's called a 508, and it's a mandatory exception. Now, I don't use the code because my ministry is private. I never became part of their club, but I do sometimes put the terminology, the ministry is a mandatory exception. But if I use their code on my documents, then I'm subservient to their trust, because a title is indicative of a trust.
Right.
So we stay away from that, but we remind them, we're over here. We're not coming over on your side. No, not playing that game.
Yeah. Your code exists. We know it exists. And here's what it says, but we don't need to remind you of what your code is, because you know the code number, and we don't need to tell you that. We'll just remind you what it says, and that's where we're living from. And that's how that goes. And so, I love that you pointed out that you don't use the codes. And as I said earlier, because those codes are for them and the employees, they're not for the people. And they created them for themselves, and they created them for their employees. And that means US citizens. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that the US citizenry, opting into that and not opting out, causes you to become their employee. And so I love that you reminded and pointed out that never use the codes, but you can certainly remind them of the verbiage that you're going to be standing on, right? So thanks for that. And so in a nutshell, the 501c3, although both 508c1a as the mandatory exception, that's still a statutory code, but the language in it is a protection for the private. side of
Yeah,
living.
and I could be wrong here, Susie, but I believe, now I've looked at that. I've looked at those sections of code, and I don't even know that you may know, but I'm not even sure that a 508 is something you sign up for. Because if you sign up, you've automatically signed up for the club. It's a
Mhm.
terminology, it's an exception that they use in their books
Mhm.
to say that, oh, that's one of those groups of, like they're private. We have to list them as this because we can't touch them. We
Yes.
don't, let me rephrase that. We don't have any administrative authority on them, so we're just going to call them a 508, etc.
Well, pardon me, it actually is a section. Um, and so although it has its own section, again, um, because they're always going to put these things, these exceptions, these mandatory exceptions like this 508, C18, this is something that they'd love to trip people up on and say, well, you cited our code, which means that you're adhering to our code. So
Hmm.
I love that you say that you don't use the code itself. You use the language and the verbiage that's in it, because in that is the power, right? Our words are our bonds. So in using the words, it bonds
Right.
the entire matter, right? And then I think that we also discussed at some point regarding regarding this exception, this mandatory exception versus the exemption. You know, exemptions, I'd like everyone to remember that exemptions require someone else's approval to exempt you from something. An
Correct.
exception means that you're just standing as an exception. So no one deems you that. You just are.
Correct.
So I wanted to just loop that in there. And I'll tell you that um the legal versus lawful angles on some of the things that you're doing and really pioneering a lot of these, you're just paving some pathways that are pretty profound. And I think that I'm probably one of your greatest fans, next to Carol, maybe. But the legal versus lawful aspect of things are, they made them appear to be so twin-like, right? They kind of stacked them in lots of the same ways. Things almost look the same. They sometimes sound the same, as I was saying before, but completely different outcomes because they have completely different meanings and effects. So I like that we have people like you that, because we need leadership, right? And people like you that can absolutely spot these things in research. Many of us research different, we all research different ways, but many of us research in ways that we take things very literally. And I, as you know, am one of those type of researchers, right? And that comes from my prior training, that you take a law, or what they're telling you is a law, because they teach you that in the schooling that I had and all of the training, and I worked as a paralegal. I have 5 specialty areas, they call it, right? So I worked with a guardian ad litem for years and court appointed special advocates. I did a lot of work with kids, and which moved me towards the advocacy work that I've done. But that was really my favorite, was unpaid advocacy volunteer work, because you were able to really get your teeth into some stuff and move things, right? So when I saw the private way that you approach things, I thought, that is just sheer advocacy work right there. That is like the real deal stuff. And so that resonated with me right away. Your the way that you do things, the way that you prepare things, approach things, and the way you come out the other end of it. And I appreciate that so much, because the way that they teach us is you take this law and then you find the elements of the law and you break it down, right? And so they taught you that if you have a client that has a charge and they don't meet every element of that law, then they can't be convicted, right? And they had you approach things that way. Whereas you've taught me to take that and flip it upside down and say, this, and this, and this doesn't even apply to you. You're outside of that jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
There's no authority there. Where's the authority of this written gobbledygook?
Yeah.
Gobbledygook,
Yeah.
right? Oh, it's horse hockey.
Yeah. It only carries authority if we choose to submit to it.
There you go. And that was a real hard one for me, Paul. That was like, what do you mean? I really, let me go at this with a different lens here. I've got to just go at this research with this different, and it really was a different heart, not a different mindset, right? And once I realized my true value in God's eyes, in God's plan, then I started learning, and all that other stuff moved out of the way, and I was able to receive the true learning, right? And the truth. So I'm really excited about asking you this next question. Tell me, there's a lot of this coming into my inboxes. Signatures versus autographs, such as well, anywhere from endorsements versus endorsements, signing trust documents to signing leases or mortgages or things like this. Tell me about that, Paul. Tell me about signatures. Let's talk about that. Signatures versus autographs.
Well, the first place my mind goes is I think about books. People that write books are called authors. And then they do book signings, which really doesn't make very much sense to me at all. Because if they're signing, actors go on a stage and they do, magicians and stuff. They it's called sign language, or acting. You think of it as artificial. It's a sign, it's not the real thing. Here's your sign.
Right.
But so why are they signing a book instead of autographing it? Because the author, you don't have you don't say, oh, he's a signatory of the book. No, he's the author.
Right.
So it's like, what is really going on here? So the author is the one that has the authority to autograph. See, they're all from the same foundational root word of author, authority, author, autograph, etc.
Right.
And when I think of signing, I think of the king's ring used as an insignia, in the wax. It's a
Right.
seal, actually. Um, I don't think there's really, I used to think that signing a name is writing in cursive, sign versus print.
Right. That's how I thought.
That's all. That's more of the horse hockey. Because whether I print or whether I write cursive is a choice of my own. It's like nobody else. Here's where people fall short. They don't, most, I would say everyone, if they're struggling in an area, and I'm talking about living in the private, but it could be in any area of, being successful, whatever they want to do. If people are struggling, it's probably because they haven't internalized here and here in their heart and their mind that they actually have free will.
Mhm.
Like, who has the authority to tell me if I can print or write cursive? Nobody. Not one freaking other soul on the planet has that authority, except for me.
Right.
So that's one part. And then, autograph is, and by the way, a copy of a wet ink autograph, like if it isn't the original wet ink on paper, then it's hearsay.
Mhm.
The copy
Okay.
is hearsay. So I actually, I've done this myself and I've helped some other people do it. Put a record on the public record where, you know, this is the one that has the authority to autograph these certain ways. And oh, by the way, these autographs can't be copied. Any copy or imitation thereof is fiction and false and without any kind of authority, you know. So that's one part. And then also, it's whatever. And you go into the BMV or places like that, they don't let you, oh, you can't put UTA or you can't put all rights reserved. These people, these people are absolutely freaking psychotic. They act like they have the authority to tell us how we can sign our name or
Right.
autograph our name. And
Right.
all they are is bottom feeding agents that get a paycheck, and they act like, they're disposable is what they are. And I'm not saying they're bad people, they're just extremely ignorant.
Right.
So nobody else has the authority to tell us. Now, there's a whole other conversation about, and I get this quite a bit. Well, how do I sign? Am I the beneficiary? Am I the grantor, the trustee? Am I the subrogee? Well, I don't know. What kind of business are you conducting? If you're autographing your name as a trustee of a trust, or you've been assigned as a trustee, now I'm talking about a trust that somebody disclosed what's going on, and you actually know that you're the trustee and there's no ambiguity about what's going on.
Right.
Well, then you sign with comma trustee. If I get together with my boys and Carol and we have a council meeting at our kitchen table, then I may sign as the minister of our ministry, or I might even sign as the paterfamilias of the house because I'm the head of the house, the paternal head of our house. And so it's about what capacity are you operating in? At work, you're the employee. And as such, you want to be very careful of what you sign because it's going to be if you put your name on something, you better be sure that you want your name on it.
Right.
So it could be the employee. If you're if you're a business owner, then you might autograph some kind of document as the CEO of the business or the president or the secretary, or like Carol is the clerk of our ministry. So when she autographs things, now she may autograph as a witness, as a council member, But on certain things, when there's a transaction done and she accepts it into the files or the record of the ministry, she'll accept it as a clerk. So there's many different capacities that we can function in.
Mhm.
And we just need to be aware of what and then there's the confusion about, oh my God, what if I sign wrong? What do I print uppercase, lower, what? And yeah, there's times that I prefer one way or the other, but what we really should be doing in all reality is every time we autograph anything, and whatever capacity it's in, we should have a rubber stamp to go underneath that and say, this cannot be changed to damage me, you moron.
Yes. I would, I wholeheartedly agree on that.
So,
I'm gonna get
because
straight away to making one of those.
the barflies, the ones that Christ said, woe unto you, that means they're cursed,
Yes, whoa,
and there's no grace for them.
right,
This is not personal. We're talking about the organization itself. They
yes.
they voluntarily became a member of the Lloyds of London, the
Mhm.
bar,
Yes,
and which means they're a member of the Vatican.
yes,
And he said, whoa, like, you guys are doomed.
yeah,
There's going to be judgment. So they're always looking to, weasel in and do what the enemy does, steal, kill, and destroy. So we should really have that rubber stamp, with underneath everything we sign. Nunya, or however we want to do it.
that's right. Yeah, when you were talking, I took a little note here that about them trying to direct. I've heard that time and again where, well, she made me re-sign it. The clerk told me I couldn't sign that way. And well, my mother never even told me how I could sign my name. You know, what what's this stranger over here across the counter telling me what I'm going to do, right? That just didn't never made sense. And so, getting back to these statutes and these codes and all of that, and so it kind of you reminded me that them directing us as to how to sign or autograph our name is very much like, and this is going to be a favorite of yours. It always comes up and it's always a favorite of yours because you step forward in it and you remind us time and again that you don't really need that. Here, let me show you what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to make it. So that reminds me of them trying to tell us, well, you need to use this form. It's this form right here that you need. If you want to do that, then you're going to need to do this form. And
Yeah.
you come back with, no, I don't. I don't need to use that form. That form has nothing to do with me. That form and I'm learning more and more because of course, it's not that I don't take your word for everything, Paul, but I do go and vet it a lot. And I go and research and I say, I've got to see if I can find something out there that actually supports this, what he's saying, right? And I do all the time. It's always supported. You're absolutely 100% correct on these things. And it says that forms are an offer of assistance. It's just an offer to, here, we've kind of laid everything out for you here. So you just go ahead and fill this out. And then at the bottom, you go ahead and sign your name and turn that in. It's a suggestion. Forms are just suggestions. They're not requirements. It's the intention that's contained in that document that you're filing, recording, or presenting and what you are trying to make this instrument do on behalf of you, your family, whatever it is, your business, your ministry. it's just a suggestion. As long as you have a document that contains exactly the intentions, the parties involved, et cetera, and so on. It's a new form if you make it.
Yep.
And so I love that kind of, it clicked in
And
my head that, yeah, them directing us to sign our name is just like them telling us we have to use forms. It's just
and
not true.
have you ever noticed
You
that the
ever
forms
noticed that?
keep changing over the years?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, they do.
So what I do for my boys, which I'm more of a contract worker, I don't do W-4s, but have done very few of them in my lifetime actually. But what I did, because back in the day when I was like 18, 19 years old, we'd fill out a W-4 and we'd go to work.
Yep.
And now they send these guys home with a stack of paperwork. There's one from the um I want to say FEMA, but it's not that. It's something else. One of the alphabet agencies, federal agencies. And there's like a whole gob of forms.
Yeah.
So what I do is on each one, I write on an angle, see annexed. And I write my own letter. And I'm telling these guys, I'm going through point by point. Your forms are discriminatory to the sons of God. And so therefore, we can't use them because you don't have a form that fits who we are. Bad call on your part, but that's just how it is. So here's the information. Da 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 da. And
Yeah.
some employers are a little bit hesitant and then they go ahead and just accept it. We've also had employers who were they broke every single IRS code in the book. I mean, these guys are arrogant, belligerent, and just plain dumb. And but here's the one thing I will point out, whether it's an employer and by the way, I have two boys that work at a factory and they do not take out any federal income tax. They're not allowed to. But the one that does, he threatened our son to take his job if he doesn't do the W-4 the way they want it. So he went ahead and did it because he wasn't sure, and I get that. And it'll come to closure yet. But when that happened, our son gets a letter from the IRS that was signed by an agent. Okay.
Oh,
They put their name on it, they signed it, and they said, hey, you filled the W-4 out wrong. And if you don't correct it, we may choose not to honor your tax exempt status. See, this is my whole point. The IRS has never, ever given us any problem. They even pointed out that, hey, you made a mistake. You need to, because you're not supposed to pay tax.
right.
Because we have letters in our files saying that we're not required to pay. We're not required to file the 1041.
Right.
But these arrogant SOBs that call themselves accountants and employers and
Right.
whatever else smart term they're supposed to be,
Right.
they're breaking the law. They're breaking the law and the code. They're violating God's people and they're violating the statutory codes. And it's just super pathetic, but we've never had any trouble. Now, what I did is I wrote letters to the employer/accountant because the accountant owns the company. And I wrote letters to him and I copied the IRS agent on everything I sent. So they know that the employer used threat and coercion.
Gotcha.
They know that. They're aware of that. Everything's on record. So, and when we endorse things, there was a time that I never had an idea, but when we endorse most people think of a check, but there's a lot of things that can be endorsed, bill of exchange, bond, um, a document that, a certificate of birth can be endorsed because it's a certificate. It's a
Yeah.
stock. And, a true endorsement, well, let me back up. If you wanna have things your way, which we're
Mhm.
supposed to be,
Yeah.
God tells us we're supposed to be above and not below. We're supposed to be the head and not the tail. The
Mhm.
corporation is the tail. So if that's how we're going to operate the way God actually wants us to, our creator, when we autograph our name on the back of an instrument, we should write a specific order on what is to happen with that instrument, whether it's
Yeah.
a check or whatever it is. We give them instructions because you know what? If we just autograph it and that's it, they'll fill in the instructions after the fact. And those instructions will be in somebody else's favor and most definitely not yours.
Yes, indeed. So what I believe you're referencing is the difference between an endorsement, IND, endorsement versus an endorsement, END. And the endorsement, correct me if I'm wrong here, the endorsement is what you're indicating that would be a signature or autograph that contains an instruction or an order
Correct.
of some sort of what to do with the instrument, document, whatever it is. An endorsement is like carte blanche, open-ended, public, free parking for everyone.
Here's a blank check. Just fill in the amount.
Blank check, there you go. That's right.
Really, really, that's how we should explain it, Susie. And an endorsement is when you sign the check, but you don't fill out the amount or who it's to.
Yeah, let's do that. Blank check. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm with that. Yeah. Okay. And the endorsement has the order and instruction
Yeah.
of handling instructions, right?
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah, we should charge handling fees for for some of these things.
Accounting fees, accounting fees are pretty, if you're a good accountant, they charge quite a bit.
Those are steep sometimes. And so on the circling back to the diagonal C annexed that you include when you send these things back, you said something that was really awesome, and I didn't write it in time because I was busying my mind in trying to absorb what you were saying and trying to intently listen. So you said to them, so you said see annexed, and in the annex you said, could you just run that by real quickly for me? You said something along the lines of you are, what were
Your
they?
forms that you provided are
Mhm.
discriminatory to the sons of God.
That's it. Thank you.
In other words, there are no forms that fit who we are. And I do the same thing on the passport application. Now, that one I'll fill in as best as I can. And then I'll also attach the cover letter,
Mhm.
the letter of explanation. And
Explanatory.
yeah, and then I will do things because, see, if you fill, they got you kind of by the short hair on the passport. Maybe someday we won't need those, but maybe if we come back as a deer or a dog, we won't need passports, right?
Yeah.
So,
Bird, maybe a bird. I don't know.
but what I do there, because if you don't fill it out, they can reject it,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
So I make sure that, and this is kind of off on a rabbit trail, but it's still in the same area because the passport DS11 is discriminatory. And so I do the explanatory statement, the letter of explanation on top, and there I list my name and everything precisely the way I want it. The house, the given name, the family name, the born date. It's not a birth date, it's a born date. So there's a lot of specifics. And then I head that up with a paragraph that says, if there's any all of these details, if there's a conflict or a difference of how it's presented in the DS-11 versus my letter, well, then my letter takes precedence over the DS-11.
Gotcha. Okay.
Now, the one thing that I haven't done that I will do whenever I send another one in, a friend of
Mhm.
mine explained this to me. He said he put specific instructions in there also that all my instructions and my explanatory letter and documentation, everything I send is attached. It has to remain together all the way through the process.
So a binding of sorts.
Yeah.
So would you, and I've heard different things about stapling. Some say yes, some say no, no holes in the documents, things like that. What says you?
Well, I don't think and I haven't stapled them. And what they did is they sent my letter back along with because I did an original authenticated birth record,
Mhm.
and they returned it all. But what he did is he copied that birth record and he instructed them that everything has to be together. It has to remain intact. They never returned it. And now, after he was done, after they had the passports, he ordered a certified copy of the application.
Hmm.
So they sent him for $50. They sent him a bonded, riveted stack copies of everything he sent in with their authentication page and their embossed seal on top, all
Nice.
bonded together. So they did keep it together. So
Right.
um, this kind of started out as a autograph or endorsement, but just know that when we add instructions, we can do that. We can say annexed or whatever your and it's interesting when you talk about that you've researched and vetted what I tell you. I'm just going to say this because when I run on my spirit,
Yeah.
there's certain things that I just do.
Yeah.
And I'm not advising anybody how to do anything. I'm just saying there's certain things I do without doing any research, except I research things internally.
Yeah.
And I have gotten a lot of answers just by sitting still and remaining quiet. And I've learned a lot of things, even the things that don't seem to really work the way I thought they would. It ends
Right.
up being a learning, and I get information that I would have never gotten. Like, for
Right.
example, I know that the BLM, the land patents, are de jure. They're not part of the corporate construct.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that the BLM doesn't play a part in the corporate construct at all. I'm saying I know for a fact that the land patent is a de jure process outside of the corporate construct. I know that because of the communication I've had with them.
Right.
And so when you talk about vetting, and I'm glad you do,
Yeah.
because it proves that what my spirit knows is accurate.
Hmm.
And this is really important because a lot of people, they'll receive answers in their mind and their heart, and then immediately the committee back here will show up. That what are you thinking? You're that they'll talk themselves out of it in no time.
Yeah. Within 5 minutes, most times, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I know that you appreciate that I vet stuff and, and sometimes I find more and give you a call and say, hey, I got to run something by you because I do trust that discernment that that you operate from, you know, That's a spiritual discernment. And I mean, if we want to just call it what it is, that is a super duper faith of knowing. I mean, didn't you just do a podcast, knowing versus believing?
Correct.
So there is really a lot to that, in that respect, that spiritual discernment is the knowing, not I believe that. I really enjoyed that podcast, by the way. That was
Thank
good.
you. Yeah,
So
like I heard somebody say, I heard a guy say that you could do something and then you could put a private plate on your car and then
yes,
no. And I've been at tables where this happened and I'd be like, "Hey, I want more information on that." You
yeah,
know, I never heard from the guy again because there is
right,
no information.
right,
Either it was his imagination totally or else it was somebody else. You know, it's just there's so much being spewed as if people know something. They don't really have anything.
yeah,
They don't even have a conviction.
yeah. And that's why a lot of people, I believe, get sidetracked on their quest for freedom and living in the private, is because they run into so many characters like that, and those that are very hungry and really willing to work at it and learn. Sometimes they just they get raked over financial coals that, well, if
Yeah.
you pay me this or that, I can tell you what I was just talking about. And then they don't really ever have anything to tell you about.
Yeah.
And that can really dishearten people quickly. And I believe that they become so disheartened that they just think, well, I'll just, whatever. I'm just going to do what I always do. Just,
Correct.
yeah. So,
And to go out and act as if you had a process, you know, I did 2.5 years in prison because I followed a double agent, which I believe is a double agent. But I learned a lot. There's no regrets on my part. It's just I know some of the things to watch for now. And since that time, I was in communication with a guy who touted this program, Grace. Oh, what the heck was it? Anyway, he was selling a process, and he wanted $1,500 for the first module, his first series of things, you know, and people like that. It's like you do step 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, and boom. So I was on the phone with this dude, and I said, the one thing that I've been frustrated with over years of researching, way, way back, is all the people that are selling a package, whether it's for 20 bucks or 100 or 500,
right,
and you can't get to them, you can't talk to them, they're nowhere to be found. And most of them, come to find out, they've never done what they're selling. It's just so, and this guy goes, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean. We've got the paper trail. We're going to come to your area and do a meeting. We've got everything. You know, it's a done deal." Oh, okay. Now keep in mind, at this time, it was myself thinking about spending 1,500. I mean, I wasn't really seriously thinking about it. But
right.
here's the other thing. There were two other people ready to drop $1,500 based on my recommendation. If I would have said, let's do it, they would have done it. That would have been 4,500.
Sure.
Now, as a caveat, as a side note here, he did get the 1,500 from a bunch of people that I know, and probably a whole bunch more that I don't know. So about a month later, and this was in 2000, I think it was in 2017 or 2018. I wrote this gentleman an email. He was from New Mexico. As far as I know, that's where he was at. That's what he said. I
Mhm.
said, you know, for my own peace of mind, I'd like to see your documentation. And I'd be willing to drive to your office in New Mexico from Indiana. I'm in northern Indiana. I said, I'll drive there and
Mhm.
I'll meet somewhere else if you don't want to meet at your office. And I'll be more than happy to sign a non-disclosure, no problem. I just want to see what you have so that I have clarity about what I'm getting into. You know that I'm still waiting on an answer.
Oh,
This
my
scumbag, this,
land.
this scumbag was CIA and still is.
Oh my.
So I was I was very fortunate that I sent that to him and I asked him because he just completely disappeared. Later, I happened to be on a call where this gentleman is talking about, oh yeah, because he got hammered. There was people that would have liked to drive to New Mexico to hang this bastard,
I bet.
and I don't blame him. So I happened to be on a call where he was trying to do damage control, and he said, "Well, yeah, we're the money that we got, we're using it to research to perfect this process." Really? Are you freaking kidding me? After you lied to me and said you've got it nailed. He was just a con artist. He was just a freaking scammer.
Sure.
So there's other things that he's lied to me about. But I'm just pointing that out because I'm just telling folks, be careful.
Sure.
If if I can't show you results, then you better be very careful. If I'm just spewing, I do believe in getting paid for my time.
Sure.
The information that I share it's as old as time,
Sure.
but with a house to be in leadership of and put groceries on the table, I don't have any problem paying somebody.
Right.
But don't act like you're a freaking master in construction when you can't even build a doghouse.
Right.
That's what a lot of these people are doing.
That's right.
Being ignorant is okay. If I'm ignorant in computer electronics,
Yeah.
that, there's no problem with that. It's when I try to tell you that I can fix your computer is when you better run.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of those masters of the mouth is what I call them. They're masters of the mouth.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of really great fancy words and lots of big,
Salad, right?
big, big things to promise and things like that. But darn
You
it,
call it
when
word
you,
salad, right?
yeah, I call that word salad. I
Yeah.
do. Lip service, word salad, lots of different words, but it it comes down to, as you said, can you can you produce that you have accomplished a certain anything? Because if you can't, then you're I'm in the wrong place and you're doing the wrong thing. So that's really what it comes down to. It isn't right, it isn't fair. And that whole golden rule of, the law, okay, the law, God's law, the very first thing is um, harm none.
Yep.
That means in any fashion, in any capacity at all. And if people are coming to you because they need financial relief from the imprisonment that they're in, the very last type of harm that I think that anyone like that should consider is harming people financially. Um, because I just I know that there are consequences to that, you know,
Yeah.
and and it goes beyond the people, bad mouthing someone or suing them for their money or whatever. It goes beyond there. That's there's a spiritual price to pay for that. And they'll pay.
Yeah.
They'll pay that money back with interest, you know. So I agree. And
I'm gonna I'm going to need to end this call. It's been longer than normal as far as time goes, but it's been very short, and I appreciate you, Soozie, for being part of this. It's been I believe we'll have a lot of views for sure. And I'm going to end it. I'm going to end it with this. And I'll let you comment before I close it down. But you talk about spiritual and financial and other consequences for harming people. At the very tail end of 2014, I was held captive for 22 days by a sheriff here in Marshall County, Indiana, Thomas Chamberlain. And he did that without any kind of consent, without any kind of authority, without any kind of right. They never booked me because, you know why? Because I didn't allow them to book me. I didn't give them consent. You cannot be booked in prison without consent. Most people don't know that, but so he held me anyway for 22 days. And, you know, less than a year later, he was in his grave. Now, I didn't realize that until some time after the fact, but I've actually talked to some of the officers at the sheriff department about that, and I realize that they don't like to have that conversation. And it wasn't me that put him there by all means. It was because he violated God's law. He stepped across a line that he shouldn't have. Maybe he didn't know better. Maybe he thought, well, somehow he'll get by with it. But the fact is there's a line that our Creator has set. And I don't care who you think you are, you probably shouldn't cross that line because there will be consequences. So when people ask me, well, where's the enforcement? That's such a pathetic question. I mean, I get why they ask it, but it's just a bad question, because if you have any kind of conviction or knowledge about how our Creator works, you would never ask that.
Right. Right. Well, I'm really glad that you made it through all of that, and appreciate you so much each and every day, myself and my family. And we really appreciate everything about you and your family, and what you're doing, and the information that you share. And I really am glad that you invited me here tonight. It's been really fun, and I enjoyed
Thank you for being
myself.
here.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. I'm always happy to chime in and talk with you, Paul.
Thank you. Have an amazing evening, and we'll talk again.
You as well. Thanks.
Bye now. Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry. I almost forgot. For those listeners that like to tune in and listen to us, go to memoirsofafarmerboy.com and click on the link, or put your information in there for further contact. Give us a like. This will be on video on my Rumble, Memoirs of a Farmer Boy channel, and it'll also be on Spotify as normal, the audio version. So with that, we'll talk to you all next time. Take care.
bye.